She's got a pot on either shoulder.
Something to laugh
Throw
about.
it over your shoulder like a continental
I think
soldier.
it's really okay.
Grandma, the sit-down comedian.
I could either be a sit down or a stand up. It doesn't matter.
Well,
Good morning. Here I am with my Aunt Kate. How are you doing?
I'm doing just fine. How are you today, David?
I'm good.
Good.
So would you like some coffee? This is Coffee Time with Dave after all.
Well, that's right, it is, but I don't drink regular coffee.
You don't drink regular coffee, do you?
I drink espresso.
Oh, very cool.
Yes, it's actually very hot, actually, when
Yeah.
I drink it, yes.
So tell me about the espresso.
Well, it's Italian, though they do have a coffee like that in France called Express, and they have coffees like that in Spain and Portugal, and it's a very intense and coffee that's made. It's very small. You get small amounts. It's a pressed coffee, and the water is pressed through very finely ground coffee beans, and it's a very strong and delicious flavor. And it really, if you want to wake up, I highly recommend it. And
All right.
it really will wake you up and will keep going throughout the day, because that's what people in those countries do. They just drop in somewhere at a cafe and go up to the bar and have, instead of a drink, so they might have that too, they will have an espresso. And often you can get them a regular espresso or a doppio, which means a double espresso.
Wow.
And
That sounds good.
it is good. It's very good.
Yeah.
It's very good. And it's becoming more popular in this country,
Yeah.
especially if you don't get much sleep. So I highly recommend it.
Awesome. Well, we have an espresso right here in a little teacup, and I'm going to try it. So, you ready?
Okay, yes.
All right.
Oh my God, he's going to choke on it.
Whoa! And I think that's the double shot one.
Yes, I think it is too.
That's great. I love it.
Oh my.
Well, I'm glad you enjoy it.
Yeah. So, now I'm a fan of espressos.
But if you go to Italy, for Rome, for instance, you'll find that people have their favorite cafes for espresso. And after dinner in the evening, they will go out and walk around and look at things like the Trevi Fountain and various other things to look at and see their friends. Then they go to their favorite cafe and to have their espresso.
So, you know what? It's such a nice day,
Yes.
and we should go outside. We should get some chairs, sit outside a while.
Okay, let's do it.
All right, and
Okay.
we're going to talk more about you, and, well, you do singing a
Yes,
lot.
I sing. I'm not a professional musician, but I do a lot of singing, 16th century choral music.
And we'll
mostly.
talk about that outside.
Okay.
You do that, and you love history. You love all kinds of
Yes,
things like that.
that. And I've been known to repair bicycles.
That's right. So we're going to talk about that in just a little bit.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
Hey everyone, Sonic Boom is playing at the Clinton Sailing Club benefit at Scottish Dave's Pub on Sunday, June 2nd. The benefit starts at 2 o'clock, and the band plays from 3 to 6. Mom's gonna be there too. What do you think?
Hey, be there or be square.
Now let's check up on the Layla cam. Today, Brandy and we brought Steve along too, we went birding because there was a rare bird at Hammonasset. It's called the Wilson phalarope or something like that. The audio in this video is going to sound terrible, but we're going...
We'll just do sign language. Anyone know sign language?
We're going birding. Brandy, look at all these kites flying around.
Wow, so nice.
What do you call a very windy campsite?
I don't know.
It's an impromptu kite festival. And now back to the show. So we're going to talk about everything else.
Okay.
So, Kate,
Yeah.
where did you go to college and how did your musical life start?
Well, my musical life actually started as a child.
I'm sure.
And singing in choir at church. And my grandparents, with whom I lived, with my mother and sister, listened to lots of classical music. So I learned a lot about that.
Mm-hmm.
But when I went to college, I went to the University of Wisconsin in Madison in the 60s, which was quite a wild and woolly time. And I got very involved. I was very involved in the anti-war movement and the civil rights movement to some extent. I was actually trying to go to school, and though a lot of us were trying to do many things at the same time and have a good time.
Yeah.
And well, one thing that I think you'd be interested in is that I was going to go to the Otis Redding concert
Oh, yeah.
when he came to Madison, but unfortunately it did not take place because the city of Madison is between two good-sized lakes. And his plane crashed into one of them.
Oh,
And he and everybody on the plane were killed, which was very tragic
yeah.
because he was a great performer. And
He
his
was.
band, his people who sang with him and played with him were also really great.
Yeah.
Well, when they hauled the plane out, they found, of course, drugs because it was the 60s.
Yeah.
And the police department took the drugs and they used them when they'd go to the high school to talk the students about how bad drugs were because you could end up in Lake Monona if you weren't careful.
Yeah. Wow, that is a crazy story. That you almost got to see Otis Redding play.
Yeah,
And you know, he was a great performer, as you said, you know. And I saw a video when he was just jumping all over the stage. He's a great singer, got a wonderful voice. You also love jazz music.
Yes, I do love jazz music. When I was young, my sister and I we shared a room, and when our parents had gone to bed, we would turn on the radio and listen to rock and roll stations from New York City. But one day, I heard Billie Holiday, and that was an amazing experience. I'd never heard singing like that. It was wonderful, and I began to listen to more of that whenever I could, more of that sort of music. And then when I was in college and I was taking voice lessons at one point, and I sang the usual repertoire of Schubert, Schumann, Fauré, whom I love, but I also sang Cole Porter and Gershwin and Jerome Kern, and because it was so much fun, and I would listen a lot to Ella Fitzgerald and various other singers of the time who I just learned a lot from them. A different approach, a relationship to music, to sound and words, the relationship of sound and words from 16th century music, which is what I usually do.
Mm-hmm. So besides jazz, you also have had a huge past with early music, as you call it.
Yeah.
Would you like to talk about that?
Sure. Well, I've actually had a huge past with choral music, a lot of which was at least Baroque, like Bach, which is one of the greatest.
I love him, yeah.
He's amazing, and it's wonderful to play or sing Bach. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
And but when I got to Boston, well, even before then, this sort of interest in music earlier than Bach, the Baroque, in other words, the Renaissance, and earlier than that, was growing in not just the United States, but in England and France and all over. And people were very interested in early instruments, playing early instruments, and then also all of the choral music that was written back then, and also music that was just for one voice, but a lot of it is for more than one. I really got interested in just the sound of this music, how in a way, the way the music is written, it does a lot of it writes in a lot of the stuff that's similar to what you do in jazz, in that there's a lot of the voices clashing with each other and then resolving. and sort of stretching, sort of, so you can really express a word or a series of words, stretching it out, and then tossing it from one voice to the next. And I just knew this was the music for me. So I started, when I moved to Boston, I moved to, as it turns out, the early music capital of the world. And especially back then, it was the first city to have an early music festival and invited people from all over to come and play and sing. And they have professionals, they still do this every year. They have professionals who are from everywhere, but also, and those are the ones you pay for. And then they also have groups who come from anywhere who are amateurs, but very good amateurs, to sing or play. And so it's an opportunity, if you are in a group like that, or if you're an individual, say a violin player or a pianist or something like that, to, have people hear you and sort of, and to share what you do with other people. So I was in a lot of different groups, singing groups in Boston area when I got there. And then I got into this group called Convivium Musicum. Well, actually, it wasn't even a name yet. It was just a group.
It was
a group
with
of
no name at the moment.
Yeah, with no name at the moment. And it got together usually in a classroom at MIT, and there were people, Harvard people, MIT people, and just other people in the group. We just, when I joined this group, it had been around for a few years, but the most recent conductor had left, so it was just, we were singing together, so we decided that I think there were 3 people in the group who wanted to be conductors, and since we were meeting at MIT, we called them our semiconductors.
That's funny. Yeah.
So they were
Good term.
so, and it was a riot. There was one guy who was totally fastidious. He was so fastidious that we went and visited him in his home. He had, all his drawers were labeled as to what was in them.
Oh my gosh.
And then there was this other guy who always he went everywhere on roller skates. So he was conducting on roller skates, which is a little dangerous, but
That's fun.
it worked out. Then there was this guy who was Cuban, who was very good, and we did some great stuff with him. And then a woman who ended up becoming a choral conductor, and she was very good.
Awesome.
So we just had a wonderful time.
So what should we talk about next? Do you think we should just do another episode sometime? Because we have so much more we could talk about.
Well, maybe we should do that.
Thank you for being on the show, Kate.
Well, thank you for having me. It was fun.
It was a good time. Thank you all for watching the show today. Hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget, we're playing at the Clinton Sailing Club on June 2nd. Link in the description. Don't forget, coffee is important. See you next week.